So welcome to technical lecture number 4. We're going to be continuing on with AutoCAD this week, and we're going to be drawing in AutoCAD and then printing to a designated scale. So the scale that we use might be 1 to 100, 1 to 50, just depends on what suits the paper size that I want to output to at the time. We're going to be plotting to PDF, just as we did last week, and we're going to not only be showing you how to do it from model space again, but how to plot out of what's called paper space in AutoCAD. And that digital PDF that we export, we're going to import into Photoshop and convert it to a rasterized file that we can color up and edit. Okay, so we're going to be drawing a section today, and just to give you a quick overrun, this slide just shows you the convention of a section cut. Over here we've got a three-dimensional mass of a building, and a imaginary plane dissects that building and represents for us in an abstract way, two-dimensionally, what's happening within the spaces in section. You can see here there's multiple ways of actually shading a section, or where the section cut takes place. You can have a nice bold white space surrounded by a thicker line weight, or you can actually color it, or you can actually diagonally hatch it, however you choose to. Just note that wherever a section cuts through a building, it always exists as a continuous line. Doesn't matter what color you actually use. So the example that we're going to use today, we're going to cut a section through this precedent, which is a house by Kate Hislop and Simon Anderson called the Long Weekend House. It's up in Gin. Okay, so we've got a kind of a perspectival elevation going on here, some internal shots, and then a shot that's been pulled back from an angle external, looking at the colonnade that goes along one face of the building. So here's the plan on the top. We've got a section through the middle. They're kind of diagrammatic. They're not technical. They just communicate the spatial relationships of the building. And here's the last little slide that shows you the other elevation of the building. Okay, so we'll go over to AutoCAD, alright, and just to get in the habit again, we'll write in units, and we'll change that level of precision down to 0 again. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do for you guys at home, or wherever you are watching this, is I'm going to reference in the file. Okay, so I just go through, find where I've saved it, the image file. I note all of these settings, of which I need to then follow the command bar, and you can see that I can specify the insertion point as 0, 0 because it's within the parentheses, and I then scale the drawing up so I can see it. Okay, now we could very easily go through and trace this, though we're not really going to learn much from doing such a thing. What I want you to do ideally is to actually print this and, using a scale ruler, redraw it in AutoCAD. So I'm going to do that here, but I'll just leave this up next to where I draw. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is I want to actually get this to a 1-to-1 scale. So we've got this little scale bar here, and if I just draw a line from the 0 on the little scale bar to the 10, I'm just going to switch on orthographic so that you can see now that it now snaps to horizontal and vertical. I can draw across to this point, like there. Now I'll just turn this over to another, I'll turn the color over to one that will match, let's say a red, which will be our thickest, boldest section cut line. And you can notice here that by default it's opened as AutoCAD Classic View, and I don't want that. I'm going to change it over 2D and drafting and annotation, sorry, which gives me a little bit more icon-driven interface. Now I can go into my layer. I'm just going to set up 3 line weights. Okay, 3 layers that I can draw on. So my first one I'm going to just say thick. Second one I'm going to say medium. And the third one I'm going to say thin. I'm not going to do any hatches because I know that I'm not going to draw any hatches. So my thick line I want to be a red. And this has hidden itself, so I can just click that icon, it opens up. My medium, I'm just going to make it into a yellow, and my thin line I'll make into a green. And remember that these colors are then matched up to correspond with particular plot settings when I go to export. Okay, so I'll just retract that for a second, and I'm going to change the active layer. So I'm going to go over to the thick line, and what I'll do is I'll just highlight this little line, and I want to put it over onto the thick layer. Okay, that was a common question from the last tutorial that I found, was just being able to actually say you draw on a particular layer. Say here I draw on my thick layer, and I don't want it on the thick layer anymore. You select it, then you go up to this bar here, activate the drop down, and choose the layer that you want to then place it on. Okay, I use E for arrays to erase things. Now, what I want to do is I want to scale this up so it's actually 10 meters. Okay, I know that 10 meters is 10,000 millimeters, and we're working in this environment where one unit that we draw is 1 millimeter. Okay, so how do I do that? I can do a referential scale. So what I can do is I can actually scale this using the referential system, which I did last time, which was in one of the sub commands for the scaling. You go through and you select referential, then you can scale based on a line that you draw, which was shown in technical lecture number 3. Otherwise, what you can do is you can actually calculate the scale factor mathematically and scale the line or the object up to the new size that you want. So we want this line to represent 10 meters or 10,000 millimeters. At the moment in model space, it's representing 33 millimeters. Okay, so I'm just going to activate my calculator, and I can do 10,000, which is 10,000 millimeters, divided by 33 millimeters to get the scale factor that I need to increase this image by, so it represents within here 1:1. Okay, so that's 303.03 recurring. So I just go in here, I can select this line, I can select this, and I can activate my scale command using SC, hitting enter. I specify the point in which I want to scale from, which is just this little one down, 0, 0. Can be anywhere though. And I can right click in here, and I can, if I've actually, say it's an odd number, I can paste that number directly in. But because it's quite a simple number to remember, I'll just write in 303.03 and hit enter. Okay, so it's scaled my image up 300 times or a little bit over. Alright, now if I zoom out, so I can use the zoom command, zoom, or I can right zoom, or I can just hit Z for zoom. I can hit enter, and I can follow the sub commands here, E for extents. I'll now zoom to the extents of my document, and this is now representing the section of the building at 1:1. And I can double check that using the distance command once again. And I did use the distance command a little bit earlier to measure that line at 33. Now it should represent 10,000. It's nearly there. It's actually 9,967. But I'm pretty happy with that. I could actually, the thing is that you're zooming in on this and you do scale it back to 1:100. So just continually remember that you're actually working on a piece of paper. So you can see that the line is there, and because there's a thickness to this line in the image, and you work predominantly with hairlines, what they call hairlines, 9967 is close enough. Alright? So the thing that I'm going to do, I'm kind of assuming that you're working from a printout in this case, and if you were to do something, if you were to actually get, you had to actually draw, not by tracing, but by having information that you've got. Say you've started to do a sketch of a design, and you want to just manually translate that line data into AutoCAD. That's the way that I'm going to draw. I could easily go in here and start to trace over this, but I'm not really learning anything. So I'm going to show you some offset commands, some divide commands to actually establish and finish a drawing. So we're going to use construction lines as well. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'll just move this to the side. So M for move. I'll chuck it over here, right? And I'm going to actually draw in this area. Now what I can do is, now this, just in case you haven't got the idea that I'm getting at, is that we're trying to learn not how to trace a drawing, we're trying to learn how to actually manually input numerical values to actually draw a building or a line or whatever. Okay, so there's two different things. But what I'm going to do is I want to draw here, and I still want to be able to navigate, but I want this image that I'm going to be referencing on the side to remain without to remain on the screen without being zoomed in and out on. Okay, and to do that, if you go to View, within the Viewport configurations list, I can actually say I want one single viewport. I can have up to 4, but all I really need for this is 2 vertical viewports that sit next to each other. Okay. Now by default it's actually spun this around, because a really handy way of working in 3D is when you work with a plan view and you work with an isometric view or an elevational view at the same time. So that's what it's for. You can see the window that has the bolder line around it is the one that's active. So this is moving, but if I want to, I can't actually move any, I can't navigate around this window on the right. So I'm just going to navigate to get that kind of set in there. I'll double click over in the right window and I'll just orientate that around, and then I'm going to move it over to a space where I can start to draw. I just switch that grid back on because I might find that that's handy a bit later on. Alright, so now I can easily draw in this right hand side, and then I can click over here and I can reference what's going on in the left hand side. Alright, so first things first, what I'm going to do is set up, I'm going to draw through the ground line. And what I'll do is I'll start the command, not waste time by going through and doing it. I'll start the command, then I'll show you the kind of principles behind it, I'll finish it. Alright. So first of all, let's set up a datum line, kind of a point of reference. We've already got our 0, 0, but maybe let's say the line, this height in section, which is kind of constant throughout the whole house apart from a few little steps, we can actually draw, and then we can kind of use what's called an offset command to set up heights of roofs and step downs in slabs and stuff. Okay, so a common thing, you don't want to draw your final lines. It's the same as when you're working manually, where you'll have a series of light 4H or very light pencil work or pen work that sets up the grid for your hardline drawings, the further you go on with the project. So we're going to do the same thing in AutoCAD. A good habit is to actually probably draw with thin lines that you can delete, or even set up a layer called construction lines that you know that you can turn off later or delete later, and then just reveal your final work. Okay, so first line is just going to be a polyline. It's going to start at 0, 0, and it's just going to be a length that exceeds that of the building. Okay, so over here, section at 1 to 1 representation. I'm measuring this using the DI tool, and the whole length of the building is approximately 46 meters long. Alright, so what I want is I'm going to draw that datum line again using the PL command, starting from 0, 0, and I'm going to go 46,000. Okay, now I'm going to zoom to the extents of that line over here, close that little layer window. Now what I'm going to do, you can see that there's all of these little beams here, right? And they fall on a pretty regular grid. So I'm going to set up another set of construction lines that pick up on that grid. Okay, and I can use, first time, I can start to introduce a command called the offset command. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to measure what that grid interval is in the horizontal plane. And you can see that it's about 3600 across. Okay, I could actually go down here and I could right click my little grid setting, and I could set my grid spacing to 3600 if I knew that that was a common interval. Make the drawing and documenting of the building a lot easier if you work to a grid. But I'm just going to, I might turn it off for now, and I'm just going to set up my own grid using polylines. So I draw one line using the PL command, And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to offset that line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 times. Okay, so we hit O for offset, and then I can write in, specify the distance that I want to offset that line that I've just created, like so, and then select object to offset. I'm just following the commands here. Specify point on side to offset. So there we go, first one there, and I just keep going along like so. Now when you get to a particular point, you can actually use another command called array. If you know that you want 12 lines, it's actually very handy. Or something that might be a little bit quicker, you just stop the offset command, grab a whole heap of these lines, and then write CO for copy, and then specify the base point in which you want to copy from, and then duplicate them. Okay, so there's multiple ways you can actually work with this. So we've set up a bit of a base grid using a series of grid lines. Okay, so grid lines are commonly used where columns, they're kind of imaginary lines where columns are set out along a building. You can see that they are here in the plan and in the section. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to use the distance command, and we're also going to use the polyline command to now draw the ground plane, and then I'll draw the roof, and then I'll draw some of the walls, and we'll add to it slowly, just measuring elements off this image and then drawing them here manually, instead of doing the technique that you guys are used to, which is tracing. So you've got to adapt the right technique for the right for the job at hand. This is more just a representation of maybe a physical document that you've got sitting in front of you that you need to manually draft up. Alright, so I've changed over to my medium layer, and I've just started off by creating a reference point, which then can be matched to this point here. Alright, that's kind of my set out point, the base of this column, in the very center of the column where it meets the ground. Alright, so now I can use the distance command, or the shortcut DI, to go from the middle or the intersection of that point out to this rise in the section line there, and I can measure it off. So I can see that that distance is 10,563. I can just jump over to here, and I can go PL enter. Following the commands, I can specify the start point by snapping onto that datum location, and then I can write in 10,563, hit enter, and if I'm happy with that as just the only command I need to do, I'll hit enter again. Okay, so I'm going to then use the next point to measure how high up that section line needs to go, and so on and so forth all the way through it until I've finished that ground line. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'll switch back on and show you how to draw by using lines that we can then rotate, etc. Okay, so what I've done here is I've, by measuring, finished my ground line all the way through, and I've even extended it beyond what's actually drawn here. I have worked out that the columns, this column, that column, this column, this one and this one, which are beyond the section line, or where the section is cut, I've put those onto a thin layer, and I've just done a few layer adjustments to suit. So I've now got my green as construction lines, which I can turn on and off as I need, and I've got thin line work as magenta. Okay, so all the columns that are appearing in this section I've created, and I just use the offset command to do those.